The lobby of the Riverside Concert Hall was the kind of place that made people whisper. Everything about it screamed money. The floors were polished marble that reflected the crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The walls were lined with gold-trimmed mirrors and paintings that probably cost more than most people make in a lifetime. And right in the center of it all sat a magnificent grand piano, black and shiny, looking like it belonged in a palace. It was almost 8 in the evening, and the hall was mostly empty except for a few people scattered around. That's when Daniel Wright walked in, and you could tell he was someone important just by the way he carried himself. His suit probably cost more than a car. His shoes made that expensive clicking sound on the marble floor. He had that look on his face, that half smile that said he owned the world and knew it. Daniel was a tech billionaire. The kind of guy you read about in magazines. At 35, he'd built a company worth billions, and he loved reminding people about it. Today, he'd just written a check for $50 million to the concert hall. $50 million. Just like that. And now he wanted everyone to know how generous he was. Walking beside him was his fiancée, Catherine Moore. She was a classical pianist, talented and beautiful, with long dark hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She'd just finished rehearsing for an upcoming performance, and she looked tired. There were little worry lines on her forehead that hadn't been there an hour ago. "Darling, that was lovely," Daniel said, his voice echoing through the empty lobby, but there was something in his tone that didn't quite sound like a compliment. "Though I did notice you stumbled on that passage in the second movement." Catherine's cheeks flushed. "It's a difficult piece. I just need more practice time." Of course. Daniel walked over to the grand piano and ran his finger along its polished surface. Then he turned around with that smile of his, the one that made people nervous. "You know what? I have an idea. Let's make this interesting." Catherine looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Daniel said, pulling out his phone and checking something, "I want to know I'm marrying the absolute best. So here's what we're going to do. Play something for me right now. Something incredibly difficult. No preparation, no warm-up. Just sit down and play." "Daniel, that's not really fair. You can't just—" "Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, third movement," he interrupted, still smiling. "Play it flawlessly, right here, right now, and I'll marry you next month. We'll have that wedding you've been dreaming about. Spare no expense." The color drained from Catherine's face. Anyone who knows anything about classical piano knows what he was asking for. That piece is brutal. Professional pianists train for years just to attempt it. It's fast, it's technical, it requires incredible strength and precision. And he wanted her to play it right now, cold, with no preparation. "That's impossible," Catherine whispered. "I haven't practiced that piece in months. Nobody could just sit down and—" "Then maybe you're not as good as you think you are," Daniel said. And there was an edge to his voice now. The smile was still there, but it had turned cold. A few other people had started gathering. Some musicians who'd been packing up their instruments, a couple of staff members. They all sensed something was happening, something uncomfortable, and they couldn't help but watch. That's when a voice came from the corner of the lobby. Quiet but clear. "That's a pretty cruel thing to do to someone you say you love." Everyone turned. Standing near the wall, holding a mop and wearing a gray maintenance uniform, was Roberto Santos. He was in his late 50s with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes. His uniform had his name stitched on the pocket. He'd been cleaning the floors, trying to stay invisible like always, but something in what he'd just witnessed made him speak up. Daniel looked at him like he'd just noticed a fly in the room. "Excuse me? Did the janitor just give me relationship advice?" Roberto didn't back down even though he knew he probably should have. "I'm just saying testing someone like that isn't love. It's just cruel." A few people in the lobby shifted uncomfortably. Catherine looked like she wanted to disappear. Daniel's smile got wider, but not in a good way. "Oh, this is rich," Daniel said, walking toward Roberto. "And what would you know about it? What would you know about classical music, or talent, or excellence? Do you even know what piano we're talking about here?" Roberto's hands tightened on the mop handle. He'd been cleaning this concert hall for 15 years. 15 years of arriving after everyone left, of mopping floors and emptying trash cans and wiping down mirrors. 15 years of listening to the music that drifted through the halls during rehearsals, of closing his eyes while he worked and letting the notes wash over him. "I know enough," Roberto said quietly. "Really?" Daniel laughed, and a few other people laughed with him, though it sounded forced. "So you're an expert now. Tell me, do you know anything about Rachmaninoff? Have you ever even touched a piano? Roberto didn't answer right away. There was something in his eyes, something old and sad and distant, memories flickering across his face like shadows. I've touched a piano, he said finally. Oh, I'm sure you have, Daniel said mockingly. When you were cleaning it, right? He turned to the small crowd that had gathered. This is perfect. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone thinks they're special. Everyone thinks they have talent, but the truth is most people are exactly where they deserve to be. Catherine touched Daniel's arm. Please, let's just go. This isn't necessary, but Daniel wasn't done. He was enjoying himself now, playing to his audience. No, I want to hear more from our resident music expert here. He looked at Roberto. You think what I asked Catherine to do was unfair? You think it's too hard? I think you're trying to humiliate her, Roberto said. And I think you already know she can't do what you're asking. Nobody could, not without preparation. Interesting, Daniel said, pulling out his phone. So you're saying it's impossible? I'm saying it's not a fair test. Then prove it. The lobby went quiet. Roberto looked confused. What? You heard me, Daniel said. And now there was a gleam in his eye, like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. You think you know so much about music? You think you understand what's fair and what's not? Then you play it. Right now. Show us all how it's done. Someone in the crowd laughed nervously. Roberto's co-workers, other maintenance staff who'd been watching, looked alarmed. One of them, an older woman named Rosa, stepped forward. Roberto, don't, she said in Spanish. Just apologize and let it go. You need this job. But Daniel was already moving toward the piano, gesturing dramatically. Come on, this'll be fun. The Janitor versus Rachmaninoff. I'll even make it interesting. He held up his phone. I'm going to record this. If you can play that piece, truly play it. Not just bang on the keys like a child, I'll give you $1 million. Cash. Tax-free if I can manage it, the crowd murmured. $1 million. That was life-changing money. But when you fail, Daniel continued, and trust me, you will fail, you're fired. Immediately. No severance, no recommendation, nothing. You'll walk out of here tonight and never come back. Catherine grabbed Daniel's arm harder. Stop this. This is too far, Daniel said. He's the one who decided to open his mouth. He's the one who thought he knew better. Now let's see if he can back it up. Roberto stood there, mop still in his hands, and for a moment you could see him thinking, calculating. He was 57 years old. He had a daughter in college, bills to pay, a life that depended on this steady paycheck. One wrong move and he could lose everything. But there was something else in his eyes too. Something that had been buried for a long time, pushing its way to the surface. And if I play it well? Roberto asked, his voice steady now. If I actually do what you're asking? Daniel laughed out loud. If you play Rachmaninoff's third like a professional? Like a genius. Then I'll give you $10 million instead of one. And I'll donate another $50 million to create a music program for people like you. People who think they have talent but never got the chance to prove it. He paused. But that's not going to happen, is it? Roberto looked at the piano. That beautiful, expensive instrument sitting there in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by marble and gold and all the trappings of wealth he'd spent his life cleaning around but never being part of. He thought about his mother. God rest her soul. About the tiny apartment in Manila where he grew up. About the used piano she'd saved for 3 years to buy, working 2 jobs, cleaning houses until her hands cracked and bled. About the lessons she'd somehow managed to pay for, sacrificing everything so her son could have something beautiful in his life. He thought about the letter that had come when he was 18. The thick envelope from a prestigious music school in New York. Full scholarship. His ticket out. His chance at the life he'd dreamed of. And he thought about the phone call that came 2 weeks later. The one that said his mother had collapsed while cleaning a hotel room. Heart attack. Gone before the ambulance arrived. And suddenly there was a funeral to pay for. A younger sister to take care of. Bills that wouldn't wait for dreams to come true. Roberto, please, Rosa whispered. Don't do this. But Roberto was already setting down his mop. He was already walking toward the piano, his worn work boots squeaking slightly. On the polished floor. The crowd parted to let him through, and you could feel the tension in the air. Some people looked excited, waiting for the entertainment. Others looked uncomfortable, like they were about to witness a car crash. Catherine had tears in her eyes. "You don't have to do this," she said softly as Roberto passed her. He gave her a small, sad smile. "Yes," he said. "I think I do." Roberto reached the piano and pulled off his work gloves, setting them carefully on the lid. His hands were rough, calloused from years of physical labor. They shook slightly as he sat down on the bench and adjusted it to the right height. Daniel stood off to the side, phone held up, recording. That smirk was back on his face. "Whenever you're ready," Daniel said. "And janitor, don't embarrass yourself too badly. I'd hate for this to go viral for all the wrong reasons." Roberto placed his fingers on the keys. He closed his eyes, and in that moment, something changed in the air around him. The first note hit the air like a lightning strike. Pure, clean, perfect. Roberto's fingers moved across the keys, and suddenly the entire lobby transformed. That massive, difficult, impossible piece of music that Daniel had chosen to humiliate Catherine with was flowing from Roberto's hands like water, not the stumbling, hesitant attempts of an amateur. This was something else entirely. Daniel's smirk started to fade within the first 10 seconds. The third movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 is a monster. It's the kind of piece that separates the good pianists from the great ones. It requires incredible speed, perfect precision, enormous strength, and delicate touch all at the same time. Professional concert pianists spend months preparing for it. Some avoid it entirely because it's just too demanding. And here was Roberto, a 57-year-old janitor in a maintenance uniform, playing it like he'd been born to do nothing else. His hands flew across the keyboard. The cascading runs came out crisp and even, every note exactly where it should be. The thundering chords shook the air, powerful but never harsh. And when the music called for tenderness, for those quiet, floating passages that sound like whispers, Roberto's touch became so light you could barely see his fingers moving. Catherine's hand covered her mouth. Tears started running down her cheeks, but she didn't bother wiping them away. She just stared, unable to believe what she was hearing. The other musicians in the lobby stood frozen. A violinist had been halfway through putting her instrument away when Roberto started playing. Now the case hung open in her hands, forgotten. A cellist stood with his mouth actually hanging open. These were people who'd trained their entire lives, who knew exactly how difficult what they were witnessing truly was. Rosa, Roberto's co-worker, had both hands pressed to her chest. She was crying too, but smiling at the same time. The other maintenance workers gathered closer, drawn by the music, by the impossible sight of their quiet colleague transformed into something magnificent. Roberto's eyes were closed. His body swayed with the music, and you could see that he wasn't thinking about the notes anymore. He wasn't reading sheet music in his head or trying to remember patterns. He was just playing. The music was pouring out of him like it had been waiting 40 years to escape. The technical passages that made famous pianists sweat seemed effortless under his hands. His fingers moved so fast they blurred, but every single note rang out clear and distinct. There was a passage about halfway through where the right hand plays this incredibly complex melody, while the left hand has to maintain a driving rhythm that keeps threatening to trip you up. Roberto sailed through it like it was nothing. But here's the thing that really got people. The thing that made Catherine cry and made the professional musicians look at each other with wide eyes. Roberto wasn't just playing the notes correctly. He was making the music mean something. Every phrase had shape and purpose. The loud parts weren't just loud. They were triumphant, or desperate, or angry, depending on what the music needed. The soft parts broke your heart. There were moments where Roberto would lean into a particular note, letting it sing just a fraction longer, and it would send chills down your spine. This wasn't just technical mastery. This was art. This was a man who understood something deep about music, about Rachmaninoff, about what the composer had been trying to say when he wrote this piece over 100 years ago. Daniel had lowered his phone. He was still recording, but his arm had dropped to his side. The smug expression was completely gone now. His face had gone pale. He looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. The music built toward the climax. This was the part where everything comes together, where all the themes from earlier in the movement return in this massive, overwhelming rush of sound. It's supposed to feel like triumph, like breaking through after a long struggle. Roberto's whole body was involved now, his shoulders rising and falling, his head tilted back slightly. The sound filled every corner of the lobby. It bounced off the marble floors and the high ceilings. It made the chandeliers seem to shimmer. People walking by outside stopped and pressed their faces to the glass doors, trying to see where this incredible music was coming from. And then, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, Roberto played the final chord. His hands came down on the keys one last time, strong and sure, and the sound rang out through the hall before slowly fading into silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence after Roberto finished playing was almost as powerful as the music had been. It was the kind of silence that happens when something profound has just occurred and everyone knows it, but nobody knows quite what to say. Then Rosa started clapping, just her at first, loud and proud, not caring that tears were streaming down her face. Then the other maintenance workers joined in, then the violinist, then the cellist. Within seconds, everyone in the lobby was applauding. Not polite applause, not the kind you give at the end of a decent performance. This was wild, amazed, overwhelmed applause. Some people were shouting. The cellist yelled, "Bravo!" and meant it with his whole heart. A couple of musicians from the orchestra had come running from backstage when they heard the playing, and now they were clapping so hard their hands must have hurt. Catherine rushed forward and grabbed Roberto's shoulder. "Who are you?" she whispered, but her voice was shaking so much the words barely came out. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Roberto's hands were trembling. Now that he'd finished, now that whatever had been possessing him for those few minutes had released him, he looked suddenly tired and old again. He stared down at the keys like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. He started, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I was accepted to Juilliard in 1985. Full scholarship." Catherine's eyes went wide. Juilliard, one of the most prestigious music schools in the world, the place where legends are trained. "But you're—" She paused, realizing how rude it would sound. "I mean, why are you? Why am I cleaning floors instead of playing concert halls?" Roberto finished for her. He smiled, but it was the saddest smile you've ever seen. "My mother died 2 weeks before I was supposed to start school. She had a heart attack while cleaning a hotel room. She was only 43. The applause had died down now. People were gathering closer, wanting to hear the story. She had no insurance," Roberto continued, his voice quiet but steady. "No savings. There were bills, the funeral, and I had a little sister, only 12 years old. I couldn't just leave her. I couldn't go off to New York to study music while she had nobody to take care of her." Rosa put her arm around Roberto's shoulders. She'd known him for 10 years and never heard any of this. "So I stayed," Roberto said. "I worked, any job I could find. I washed dishes, I delivered packages, I cleaned buildings. I raised my sister. Put her through nursing school. She's a pediatric nurse now down in Miami. She has 3 kids, good kids." "But the music," Catherine said. "All these years. How did you—" "I never stopped," Roberto said simply. "I couldn't. It was like breathing. I had to play or I'd die inside. So I found ways. Community centers that would let me use their piano after hours. Churches where the priest took pity on me. I'd practice at night whenever I could. 2 hours here, 3 hours there. Sometimes, I'd go weeks without touching a piano, and it would feel like I was going crazy." He looked around the lobby at the fancy decorations, at the expensive piano. "I've cleaned this hall for 15 years. Every night I'm here, I listen to the rehearsals. I listen to the performances when I can. I mop the floors and empty the trash, and the whole time there's music in my head. Always music." Daniel finally found his voice, but it came out weak and uncertain. That was. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. For once in his life, words failed him. Roberto turned to look at him, and there was no anger in his expression. Just tired acceptance. "I know what you were trying to do," he said. "You wanted to embarrass Catherine. You wanted to show everyone that you're important, that you're better than everyone else. And you wanted to humiliate me for speaking up." Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. The sad thing is, Roberto continued, you almost succeeded. If I'd failed, if I'd sat down and proved I was just a foolish old man, who didn't know his place, you would have felt so satisfied, and I would have lost the job I need to pay my rent. I gave you a chance to win $10 million, Daniel said, but his voice had no strength in it. You gave me a chance to be destroyed on camera, Roberto corrected gently. You never thought I'd actually be able to play? You thought you were going to get a viral video of a janitor making a fool of himself. Daniel's face turned red. That's not… But you did give your word, Roberto interrupted. In front of all these witnesses, $10 million if I played like a genius, and a $50 million donation for a music program. The lobby had gotten very quiet again. Everyone was looking at Daniel now, waiting to see what he'd do. He was trapped. If he refused to pay, he'd look like a liar and a cheat. The video on his phone had captured everything, his own words, his own challenge, and by now other people had their phones out too. This was going to be all over the internet within hours, no matter what he did. Daniel's hand tightened on his phone. You could see him thinking, calculating. His reputation, his image, the press this would generate. I keep my promises, he said finally, though the words seemed to hurt coming out. The money will be transferred to you by tomorrow afternoon. And the donation… He paused, swallowed hard. The donation will be made to establish a music education program. Roberto nodded slowly. Thank you. But I want something clear, Daniel said, and some of his old arrogance was creeping back into his voice. This doesn't change anything. You got lucky. You had some training once a long time ago and you managed to remember it. That doesn't make you special. Catherine was staring at Daniel like she'd never seen him before. How can you say that? After what we just heard? What we heard, Daniel said sharply, when it was a fluke. A party trick. Real musicians do this every day. They don't clean toilets for 15 years and then expect applause for remembering how to play one piece. The musicians in the crowd looked uncomfortable. A few of them shook their heads in disgust. The violinist actually made a sound of disbelief. You really don't get it, do you? Catherine said softly. She pulled off her engagement ring, just slipped it right off her finger and held it out to Daniel. This whole time I thought you loved music. I thought you understood what it meant. But you don't. You just love owning things, including me. Catherine, don't be dramatic, Daniel said, but there was panic in his eyes now. I'm not being dramatic, she said. I'm being clear. For the first time in a long time, she set the ring on top of the piano. Roberto played with something I've been chasing my whole career and never quite found. Heart. Truth. He played like someone who loves music more than life itself, because that's what he is. And you can't even see it, she turned to Roberto. Would you teach me? She asked. I don't mean technique. I know technique. I mean, what you have, that thing that makes music more than just notes. Roberto looked surprised. Don't say you're just a janitor, Catherine interrupted. You're a musician. You always were. The world just forgot to notice. Daniel stood there, ring sitting on the piano, his ex-fiancée talking to the janitor like he'd disappeared. His phone was still in his hand, still recording everything, capturing his own humiliation. And all around them, people were pulling out their own phones, typing furiously, uploading videos. Within an hour, Roberto Santos would be famous. Within a day, his performance would have millions of views. Within a week, his life would never be the same again. But in that moment, standing in the lobby with his hands still tingling from the music, Roberto wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about his mother and hoping somehow, somewhere, she knew. Roberto woke up the next morning to 247 missed calls. He stared at his phone, confused and still half asleep. The cheap phone he'd had for 6 years was buzzing continuously, the screen lighting up with notification after notification. Text messages, voicemails, emails to an account he barely remembered having, friend requests on social media from people he'd never met. His small apartment felt different somehow, quieter, like the calm before a storm. He shuffled to his bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and looked at himself in the mirror. Same tired eyes, same gray hair that needed cutting, same rough hands with calluses from years of janitorial work. Nothing had changed, except everything had changed. He made coffee in his old percolator and sat down at his tiny kitchen table. The apartment was modest. 1 bedroom, a bathroom where the toilet sometimes ran, A kitchen with appliances from the 90s. But it was clean and it was his, and the rent was something he could afford on his salary. Or at least it had been his salary until last night. Roberto pulled out his phone and started scrolling through the messages. Most were from reporters. News channels, online magazines, blogs. Everyone wanted an interview. Everyone wanted his story. There were messages from concert promoters, from music schools, from documentary filmmakers. Someone from a major talk show wanted him to fly to California. Another message was from a publisher who wanted him to write a book. Then there were messages from people he'd worked with over the years. His supervisor at the concert hall asking him to call urgently. Rosa, his coworker, saying, "Check the internet," with about 50 exclamation marks. His sister in Miami, her message just saying, "Call me right now, are you okay?" He opened up YouTube and his hands started shaking. The video of his performance had 30 million views. 30 million. In less than 12 hours. The comments went on forever. People from every country you could imagine, all saying the same things in different languages. This made me cry. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Who is this man? There were reaction videos from professional pianists, some of them famous, analyzing his technique. Classical music channels had posted about him. News websites had written articles with headlines like, "Mystery Janitor Stuns World with Genius Piano Performance," and "The Hidden Maestro, Man Behind the Mop Plays." Like a master. Roberto set his phone down and just sat there for a minute trying to breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. His phone rang. He almost didn't answer it, but the number looked official. "Professional, Mr. Santos?" A woman's voice, crisp and businesslike. "This is Jennifer Park from Wright Industries. I'm Mr. Wright's executive assistant. He asked me to inform you that the $10 million payment has been processed and should appear in your account within the next few hours. We'll also need your tax information to ensure everything is handled properly." Roberto's mouth went dry. $10 million. He'd thought in the harsh light of morning that maybe Daniel would try to back out, find some loophole, but apparently not. "Also," Jennifer continued, "Mr. Wright has already initiated the $50 million donation for the music education program. His legal team will be in touch regarding the establishment of the foundation and its administration." "I don't know anything about running a foundation," Roberto said. "That's why Mr. Wright has hired professionals to help you," Jennifer said, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly want to be having this conversation. "They'll be reaching out to you today to schedule meetings." After she hung up, Roberto sat in silence. $10 million. He couldn't even imagine that much money. He'd never had more than a few $1,000s in his bank account at once, usually much less. He'd spent his entire adult life living paycheck to paycheck, stretching every dollar, shopping at discount stores, fixing things himself because he couldn't afford to hire anyone. And now, because of one performance, one impossible night, he was a millionaire 10 times over. His phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized. Antonio Rivera, the head of maintenance at the concert hall. Roberto's boss for the last 15 years. "Roberto," Antonio said when he answered. His voice was warm, excited. "Have you seen what's happening?" "You're everywhere." CNN, BBC, every major news outlet. "Do you know what this means for us?" "Us?" Roberto asked. "The concert hall. The publicity is incredible. We're already getting calls from people wanting to book tickets, wanting to know when you'll perform again. The board of directors is thrilled. This is the best thing that could have happened." Roberto felt something twist in his stomach. "Antonio, I'm a janitor. I was just doing my job last night until—" "About that," Antonio interrupted. "Obviously you can't continue in maintenance. It wouldn't look right, you know. The world-famous pianist mopping floors? But we want you to stay connected to the hall. We're thinking we could create a new position for you, artist in residence maybe. You could do workshops, master classes. What do you think?" "I think I need some time to process all of this," Roberto said quietly. Of course. But Roberto, this is your moment. Don't let it pass you by. How many people get a chance like this?" After he hung up, Roberto realized something that made him feel slightly sick. Everyone wanted a piece of him now. Everyone had ideas about what he should do, where he should go, who he should be. The quiet life he'd built, the simple routine that had sustained him for decades was gone. There was no going back to normal. His doorbell rang. Then rang again. Then someone knocked loudly. Roberto looked through the peephole and saw 3 people with cameras and microphones standing in the hallway. Reporters. They'd found his address somehow. He didn't answer. He just stood there, frozen, listening to them call out questions through the door. "Mr. Santos, can we talk to you about your performance? Mr. Santos, what does it feel like to be an overnight sensation? Mr. Santos, is it true you were accepted to Juilliard?" His phone rang again, and again. The notifications kept coming. A constant stream of demands for his attention, his time, his story. Everyone wanted something from him. Roberto sat back down at his kitchen table and put his head in his hands. You'd think having your dreams come true would feel better than this. By afternoon, he'd fled his own apartment. The reporters had multiplied. There were news vans on his street. His neighbors were being interviewed. Mrs. Chen from down the hall was on camera talking about what a quiet, polite man he'd always been. The superintendent was describing how Roberto always paid his rent on time. Roberto called Rosa. She came and picked him up in her old car, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like they were in some kind of spy movie. They drove to her house across town, and for a few hours Roberto felt like he could breathe again. "It's crazy," Rosa said, pouring him coffee in her kitchen. Her walls were covered with photos of her grandchildren. "Everyone's talking about you. My daughter called me crying because she was so proud. She said, 'Mama, you work with a genius and you never told us.'" "I'm not a genius," Roberto said tiredly. "I just know how to play piano." "Roberto, stop." Rosa sat down across from him. "I've known you for 10 years. You think I didn't know you were special? Sometimes I'd come in early and catch you humming to yourself while you worked. Complex things, classical pieces. And your hands, the way you'd move them sometimes like you were playing invisible keys."
"I knew there was something more to you. Then why didn't you say anything?"
"Because you didn't want me to," Rosa said simply. "You needed to be just Roberto the janitor. I respected that. But now the whole world knows and you can't take it back." Roberto's phone buzzed again. He'd turned off the notifications, but it still lit up constantly. "I don't know what to do, Rosa. All these people, they have all these expectations. They want me to give concerts, do interviews, teach master classes. They want me to be someone I'm not." "Who says you're not that person?" Rosa asked. "You played like an angel last night. That wasn't fake. That was you. That was me 40 years ago," Roberto said. "That was the person I should have been, could have been, if life had gone differently. But I chose a different path. I chose to take care of my sister, to work these jobs, to live this life. And I made peace with that choice a long time ago." "Maybe you didn't have to choose," Rosa suggested. "Maybe you could have been both people." "No," Roberto said firmly. "You don't understand. The level I was at, the level required to play professionally, it requires everything. Hours and hours every single day. Total dedication. You can't do that while working 2 jobs and raising a child. It's not possible." "But you kept playing anyway," Rosa pointed out. "All these years. Finding pianos wherever you could, practicing in the middle of the night. That's dedication too." Roberto didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, while his phone continued its relentless buzzing. Finally, Rosa said, "What do you want, Roberto? Not what everyone else wants. What do you want?" It was a good question. Roberto closed his eyes and thought about it. "Really thought about it. I want to teach," he said finally. "Not master classes for rich kids who already have every advantage. I want to teach people like me. People who have talent but no opportunity. People who work night shifts and practice on broken pianos in community centers. People who've been told they're too old, too poor, too late." Rosa smiled. "Then that's what you should do." "But everyone expects—" "Forget everyone else," Rosa interrupted. "You have $10 million. You have the world's attention. You have a billionaire who just promised $50 million for music education. Use it. Do something that matters." Roberto's phone lit up again. This time it was a text from Catherine, the pianist from last night. "I meant what I said. I want to learn from you. Not just me. I know others who would too. Call me when you're ready." Another text came through seconds later, this one from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Santos, my name is Helen Park. I'm a music professor at State University. I've watched your performance 17 times. I have students who need to hear your story. Please consider speaking to them." And another. "This is David Chen. I'm 43 years old. I work in a warehouse. I used to play violin but gave it up 20 years ago because I needed to support my family. Watching you last night made me cry. You made me remember what I gave up. Thank you. The messages kept coming. Not all from reporters or promoters now. Regular people. Dozens of them. Hundreds. People sharing their stories. Their regrets, their dreams they'd buried. I gave up painting to become an accountant. I wanted to be a dancer, but my parents said it wasn't practical. I wrote poetry in college, but life got in the way. Watching you play reminded me of who I used to be. Roberto read through them with tears in his eyes. All these people, all these buried dreams, all this potential that the world had never seen because life got complicated and bills needed paying and dreams had to wait. Rosa, he said quietly, I think I know what I need to do. She squeezed his hand. Tell me. I need to find them, Roberto said. All the people like me. The ones who gave up their art because they had to survive. The ones who still practice in secret. The ones who think it's too late. I need to tell them it's not too late. That their art still matters. That they still matter. His phone rang again, and this time Roberto answered it. It was one of the lawyers Jennifer had mentioned, calling about the foundation. The $50 million music program that Daniel had promised. Mr. Santos, we need to discuss the structure of the foundation and its mission statement. Do you have any initial thoughts on how you'd like the program to operate? Roberto looked at Rosa, at her kitchen full of family photos, at the life she'd built while still remaining herself. He thought about his sister in Miami, about the sacrifice that had shaped his whole life. He thought about his mother, working herself to death so he could have piano lessons. And he thought about all those messages on his phone. All those people reaching out from the darkness saying, I see you. I understand. I gave up my dreams too. Yes, Roberto said into the phone, his voice steady and strong. I know exactly what this program needs to do. 3 months later, Roberto stood in front of a building that used to be a warehouse. It was in a rough part of town, the kind of neighborhood where people kept their heads down and minded their own business. Graffiti covered some of the walls. The parking lot had cracks running through it like rivers on a map, but inside something beautiful was happening. The warehouse had been gutted and transformed. What used to be a space for storing industrial equipment was now filled with light and sound. There were practice rooms with real soundproofing, a performance space with good acoustics, and everywhere there were instruments, pianos, violins, cellos, guitars, drums. Some were brand new. Others had been donated and carefully restored. A sign hung over the entrance, simple and clear, the Second Chance Academy of Music. Roberto walked through the main hall, listening to the sounds drifting from the practice rooms. A violin, still squeaky but earnest. Someone singing scales, their voice rough but determined. The plinking of piano keys as someone worked through a difficult passage. Sounds like home, doesn't it? Catherine appeared beside him. She'd become his partner in this venture, putting her own considerable reputation behind the academy. She'd also permanently ended things with Daniel, though Roberto tried not to feel too satisfied about that. It sounds like possibility, Roberto said. They'd opened the academy 6 weeks ago, and the response had been overwhelming. They'd put out a simple call. Have you given up on your art? Do you work long hours at jobs that drain you, while your dreams sit untouched in the back of your mind? Do you think you're too old, too busy, too late? We're here to tell you that you're not. Over 3,000 people had applied for the first session. People from every background you could imagine. They'd accepted 50 to start with, carefully chosen. Not based on raw talent, though that mattered, but based on their stories, their dedication, their hunger to reclaim something they'd lost. The students ranged from 22 to 67 years old. There was Linda, a 45-year-old nurse who'd played cello in high school but hadn't touched one in 27 years. There was James, a 51-year-old postal worker who'd written songs his whole life but never let anyone hear them. There was Yuki, a 33-year-old immigrant who'd been a concert pianist in Japan but now worked as a housekeeper, her work visa not allowing for much else. They all had jobs. They all had responsibilities. The academy worked around that. Classes in the evenings, weekend intensives, flexible schedules, and absolutely no tuition. The $50 million foundation covered everything. Roberto walked into one of the practice rooms where a group lesson was happening. Catherine was teaching and she'd changed. Her whole approach to music education, no more the harsh perfectionism she'd learned at conservatory. Now she taught with patience and joy, helping people remember why they'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Remember, she was saying to a group of adult students sitting with their instruments, we're not here to become professional musicians. Some of you might, and that's wonderful, but that's not the point. The point is to reconnect with the part of yourself that creates beauty, the part that got buried under bills and responsibilities and the weight of just surviving. One of the students, a man in his 40s still wearing his uniform from the delivery company he worked for, raised his hand. But is it selfish? Taking time for this when I have a family to support? Is it selfish to breathe? Catherine asked. Is it selfish to eat? Art isn't a luxury for people who have spare time. Art is food for your soul, and when your soul is fed, you're better at everything else. You're a better parent, a better partner, a better person. Roberto watched from the doorway and his heart felt full. This was what he'd wanted. Not fame, not accolades. This, the chance to give others what he'd fought so hard to keep for himself. After the class, Catherine joined him in his office. It wasn't much, just a small room with a desk and a window that looked out at the practice rooms. But it was his. We got another wave of applications, Catherine said, dropping a folder on his desk. 412 this time. People saw the news coverage and want to be part of the next session. The academy had gotten a lot of press. Good press, mostly. Stories about the 57-year-old janitor who'd become an overnight sensation and then immediately turned down concert offers to build something for others. Roberto had done a few interviews, always steering the conversation away from himself and toward the mission of the academy. But not everyone was supportive. Also, Catherine said, her voice changing, Daniel's lawyer sent another letter. Roberto sighed. What does he want now? Daniel had been causing problems since the beginning. He'd paid the money, true to his word, but he'd tried to control how it was spent. He wanted the foundation named after him. He wanted to approve every decision. He wanted board seats and veto power and all the prestige that came with being associated with something good, without actually understanding what made it good. Roberto had refused. The foundation board was made up of musicians, educators, and community members, people who understood the mission. Daniel had thrown a fit, threatened lawsuits, and made angry statements to the press about how he was being shut out of his program. He's claiming we're misusing the funds, Catherine said. Says the academy should be attached to a major concert hall or university, not in a warehouse in a questionable neighborhood. Of course he does, Roberto said. Because he doesn't understand that the location is the whole point. People in this neighborhood can walk here. They don't have to take 3 buses to get to some fancy hall downtown. This is where we need to be. Catherine nodded. I know, the lawyers say his case is weak. He made a public commitment with no strings attached. But he's going to keep being a pain about it. Let him, Roberto said. We're doing good work. That's what matters. A knock on the door interrupted them. It was Yuki, the former concert pianist from Japan. She looked nervous. Mr. Santos, do you have a moment? Of course. Come in. Yuki sat down, her hands twisting in her lap. She was a small woman, delicate with the kind of perfect posture that came from years of piano training. I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been offered an opportunity. Roberto waited. One of the other students told a friend about me. That friend works at a music agency. They heard me play, and they want to represent me. They think they can get me concert bookings, recording contracts. They say I could have the career in America that I had in Japan. That's wonderful, Roberto said, and meant it. You're incredibly talented. But there are conditions, Yuki said. I would need to commit full-time. No more housekeeping work. No more classes here. They want me available for travel, for rehearsals, for networking events. They want me to be marketable. She said the last word like it tasted bad. And you're not sure, Roberto said. I cleaned houses in Japan too, Yuki said quietly. Before the concerts, after the concerts, my family had no money. I played piano because my grandmother taught me on an old keyboard she found in the trash. When I got good enough to perform, people were shocked. They couldn't believe someone like me could play like that. And I hated it. Hated being their inspiration story. Hated performing not for the music, but to make other people feel good about themselves for supporting a poor girl with a dream. Roberto understood completely. He'd been dodging the same trap for months. Everyone wanted him to be their feel-good story, their proof that the system works if you just try hard enough. They didn't want to hear about the decades of struggle, the opportunities lost, The talent wasted because society couldn't see past his uniform. You came to America for a fresh start, Roberto said. Yuki nodded. I thought I could just be a person here. Just work, live quietly, play piano for myself. But then I found this place and I remembered how much I love playing for others when it's on my terms. When it's not about being inspiring or marketable. Just about the music, so what do you want to do? Roberto asked. I don't know, Yuki admitted. The opportunity is real. I could build a career. Make money. Stop cleaning houses. But I'm afraid I'll lose myself again. Afraid I'll become what they want me to be instead of who I am. Roberto thought for a moment. When I played that night at the concert hall, I wasn't thinking about my career or my future. I was just angry and hurt and I wanted to prove something. But when I actually sat down and put my hands on those keys, all of that disappeared. It was just me and the music. That's the only time I felt completely myself in 40 years. So you think I should turn it down? Yuki asked. I think you should do whatever lets you feel like yourself, Roberto said. If performing professionally does that, wonderful. If it doesn't, also wonderful. The world is full of people who will tell you what you should want. They told me I wasted my life by not pursuing music professionally. They told me I was foolish for turning down concert offers after my performance went viral. But I know who I am. I'm a teacher. I'm someone who finds talent in unexpected places and helps it grow. That's what makes me happy. You need to figure out what makes you happy. Yuki sat quietly for a moment. Then she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Thank you. I think I know what I need to do. After she left, Catherine looked at Roberto with admiration. You're good at this, at seeing people clearly. I've had a lot of practice being invisible, Roberto said. You learn to see others when nobody sees you. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Roberto taught an evening class, reviewed applications for the next session, and met with the contractors who were building additional practice rooms. The academy was growing faster than they'd anticipated. They were already planning a second location across town. At 9 o'clock, most of the students had left. The building was quiet except for one practice room where someone was still playing. Roberto walked over and looked through the window. It was James, the postal worker who wrote songs. He was sitting at a piano playing something original, something beautiful. His eyes were closed and he was completely lost in the music. After he finished his mail route every day, he came here, sometimes until midnight. Learning, practicing, creating. Roberto didn't interrupt. He just stood there watching, remembering what it felt like to be so consumed by music that the rest of the world disappeared. He'd given up so much for those moments. And now he was giving others the chance to have them too. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister in Miami. I'm so proud of you, big brother. Mom would be too. Roberto's eyes stung. His mother had died thinking her sacrifice had been for nothing, that her son's talent would be wasted. She never got to see this, never got to know that her boy had found a way to matter after all. But maybe somehow she knew. Maybe somehow, wherever she was, she could see what he'd built. Not just the academy, but the hundreds of lives it would touch, the dreams it would reignite, the music it would bring into the world. His phone buzzed again. This time it was from Daniel's lawyer. Roberto didn't open it. Whatever it said could wait until morning. Right now he had more important things to think about. James finished his song and opened his eyes. He saw Roberto watching and smiled sheepishly. Sorry, I know it's late. Don't be sorry, Roberto said, opening the door. That was beautiful. Is it new? I wrote it this week, James said. It's about my daughter. She's 6. I want her to know that her dad is more than just a guy who delivers mail. I want her to see me create something. She's lucky to have you, Roberto said. I'm lucky to have this place, James replied. 3 months ago, I thought my life was over. Just work, sleep until I died. Now I feel alive again. That was it, Roberto thought. That was why all of this mattered. Not the viral videos or the news coverage or even the beautiful music. It was the look in James's eyes when he said, I feel alive again. Roberto had spent 40 years of his life invisible, his talent hidden, his dreams deferred. But he'd never stopped being alive inside.